Hello and welcome to another episode of All Elite Arcade. I am your host, Evil Uno, as well as co-host, The Chugs. How are you doing, The Chugs?
I'm doing great. It's been an Elden Ring-filled week for me. Actually, for both of us, my friend.
Yeah.
But I'm doing great. Again, I look forward to this every single time we get the chance to talk video games for an hour or so. So yeah, I'm doing awesome.
I know a lot of people out there playing Elden Ring's DLC, or playing Elden Ring because, you know, high bar to the Elden Ring game. You have to actually beat it to get to this DLC. I know a lot of my friends that are still actively trying to get beyond the Fire Giant to even get to the later parts so that it can play Shadow of the Erdtree. But if we played, I think last week we both played about 6 hours when we jumped in. I might have put in another dozen, if not more hours. I haven't actually calculated. I do know in my hotel room 2 nights ago for 4 hours, I tried to fight the same boss over and over and over and lost. Which I will not count in my total time played. But yeah, we're about 20 hours into Shadow of the Erdtree, and a lot, I think, of the same feelings as before. It has been incredible.
It really has. It's been so, because I think I'm probably about 20 hours in as well with this DLC. And to me, the most exciting thing, aside from the fact that, again, I know we've already discussed this, but it still gives you that same sense of wonder that the base game did. But my favorite part is we were talking a little bit off the podcast because we were also trying to maybe avoid as many spoilers as we can with all of you. But me and Uno are at completely different parts of the game.
Yep.
We put the same amount of time in, and we both experienced completely different things, which is so awesome. It just shows how huge this DLC is. You know, I mentioned this before too, when Miyazaki said the DLC is like the size of Limgrave. Okay, maybe it's close as far as map size, but what we're realizing now is just how unbelievably amazing the verticality is
so dense
in this DLC.
So dense with stuff.
It's so dense.
Yeah.
Man, it's like every area that you go is such a massive, beautiful, amazing area. And again, going off the difficulty, my goodness, there was an early boss, a main boss that I was fighting in this DLC, who I was stuck on for such a long time. The difficulty is absolutely no joke, which is it does correlate with DLC when it comes to From Software Soulsborne games.
I mean, the Bloodborne game, the DLC was the hardest part by all. I don't remember if I ever played the DLC for Dead Souls or Dark Souls 3. But I heard that was amazing, but also incredibly difficult as well. I'm at a difficulty level. It's weird because I read all these articles. Everyone is claiming this is by far the most difficult piece of Elden Ring content. And a lot of people, in fact, a surprising thing is on Steam, it actually got mixed reviews based solely, well, not solely, but based mainly on the difficulty curve. And some issues with optimization for certain PCs. But it was very surprising because this is the game that's known for being challenging. So to me, when it presents me with a challenging boss, I feel like there has to be a way to beat it. Like they're not sending you things that you can't possibly beat. So I'm at a point where I feel like it is extremely hard, but I don't feel it's any worse than what I did in the late parts of Elden Ring. But I have experienced a few things where I'm like, okay, this is beyond even Mog. This is I'm at a current fight where there's a big debate currently, actually, that there's 2 bosses that everyone who has played the DLC are having a competing ranking as far as who is the hardest boss of all time. So Melania, which of course was known as the hardest boss of the Elden Ring game.
Oh yeah.
Of all the bosses in Elden Ring, she took me the most attempts by far. And I think I only beat her by being extremely cheap, if I remember correctly. Like I had Mimic Tier, I high leveled, I attacked her in every unreasonable situation possible to try and beat her. But now, I will disclose the name. I will not tell you about the quality of the actual fight or anything like that. But I'm currently fighting Mesmer, which is a character early on in the DLC that is referenced a lot. He is on the cover of the DLC, so it is not a character that you are unaware exists.
Yeah.
But Mesmer is a heck of a challenge right now. I have played at least 4 hours of this battle alone, and I've reached a midway point, but not any further than this midway point. And just so everyone's aware, I am using Mimic Tier, and I am still using Bloodhound Fang.
It's the best. It's the best.
It is, because I have attempted some of the new weaponry, and I realized very quickly why I have the Bloodhound Fang, and that's because the attack is much quicker. It causes bleed when done properly, and on top of that, I have an understanding of how many hits I can hit with it. Every time I attempt something different, it's like I have to relearn an entire new game, and so I've had a really hard time with this DLC because I want to jump into the new stuff. There's all the martial arts aspect seems interesting.
So
the
cool.
shield builds, they have that the new two-handed stuff. But I'm just not good at it in any way, shape, form.
Well, Uno, can I comment? Because I had the same thought process where I'm like, I'm going to use a new weapon from the DLC to the point where I had a great katana, made it a quality great katana, got it up to plus 25. And don't get me wrong, it's a fun weapon. It does the exact same amount of bleed buildup. But the biggest differences for sure is one, the move set of the Bloodhound's Fang. There's a move with the quality great katana or the great katana where you slash and then do a stab motion.
Yes.
But if you knock the enemy down, you completely miss the second hit every time if they go down. Where with the Bloodhound's Fang, it does this sweeping motion, and it is a little bit faster, so you get that extra hit. Also, I'm convinced the poise damage is better with the Bloodhound's Fang because it's a bigger sword.
Yes.
And then Bloodhound's Finesse, the unique skill, is one of my favorite skills in the entire game. So again, I may end up switching, but I completely agree with you. Bloodhound's Fang has been a lifesaver in this DLC.
I think in my attempt, I'll probably have to go back and do a second attempt because right now I can't foresee myself beating this game without using Blood Fang. And on top of that, I've told myself I wouldn't use Mimic Tier, and on some of these boss battles, I've been very lucky where I just jumped at the flow state, and I've been able to beat some of the harder bosses on a pretty short amount of attempts. But then I get humbled pretty quickly if I don't hit that flow state, and even with Mimic Tier, this is an extremely difficult game. I fought a few bosses now where if it was not for Mimic Tier, I don't think I would have beat them for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there was a phase with a boss that I fought, which is very early on in this DLC, where I died roughly 30 times. And then I got to a point, it was the same thing. I was like, I'm going to test myself. I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to try to not use Mimic Tier. And after 30 attempts, I finally went, all right, I'm going to give Mimic Tier a go. And then I was able to beat the boss. So it definitely helps. But these bosses are no joke. I'm so curious to think, because I unfortunately have not had the chance to fight Mesmer yet. I was at a point where I think I'm close to maybe fighting Mesmer, and then I got cold feet and was like, I want to explore the open world a little bit more, because I feel like there's a bunch of stuff that I missed. And I did explore all these different areas. There's one area which I won't go into the detail as far as the name. I won't even go into a bunch of detail as far as what it looks like. But I will say this. It's one of the most beautiful areas in any Soulsborne From Software game I have ever seen. Like my mouth opened. I was so blown away by how beautiful this area was. And then once again, like every area in this DLC, how much content there was. Again, I fought a boss, went through a whole new area. It was awesome, and it felt so hidden and kind of away from the rest of the map. But Uno, I am curious because I have not gone toe-to-toe with Mesmer yet, because I had a lot of trouble with Melania. When I fought Melania, that actually, me getting absolutely demolished by Melania was what made me backtrack and go get Mimic Tier.
Yes,
to eventually beat Melania. Up to that point, I didn't have Mimic Tier at all. And then with Mimic Tier, I was able to beat Melania after a couple attempts, too. It wasn't even like a first try. It still took me a handful of tries. But in your perspective, because I am hearing more and more that Mesmer is the new Melania, how would you compare the difficulty with Melania versus Mesmer, because I haven't fought Mesmer yet. I'm nervous.
So it's funny. I think I'm at that phase where Melania and Mog, which is surprisingly are the two bosses you have to defeat if you want to play this DLC. So they're telling you straight up, you have to beat the two hardest bosses. But in Elden Ring, I never went and looked up guides on how to beat any bosses because I thought like, oh, I can figure out the patterns. I could do it myself. But both Mog and Melania were ones where I was like, I need to watch videos because I cannot comprehend when I'm supposed to get an opening because the openings are so short. Mesmer seems to be a lot of the same thing. I have my Mimic tier activated when I'm doing these fights in hopes that I can just find an opportunity to attack, right? Like that's what I think is the usefulness of Mimic tier. It is less about Mimic attacking at half my strength and attacking it constantly, and more about creating me openings to either heal or get in a 3-hit combo or something. So
that's it.
Mesmer, I've been able in the first half of it, I have been able to figure out some of the pattern, but I am at a point where I don't know when the hell I'm supposed to find an opportunity to hit him. In anything other than, so I've seen a few opportunities where I'm like, okay, there's like a 4-second gap here where I think he stays still and I can potentially hit him, but maybe for one big hit. And now I'm wondering if that's the kind of fight this is going to be, where I have to just inch forward with one hit at a time rather than trying to get a little combination. It also kind of really feels like a Sekiro fight at times because the amount of attacks that are thrown at you, I almost feel like I need to be capable of parrying all of them for it to make any sense, and I have not been able to do that yet. So I don't know if I would say he is harder than Melania yet, but if this takes me another 4 hours to even get to a quarter left of it, then yeah, I think so. This might be the boss I'm going to spend the most time on for sure. Because Melania took me, I'd say, over 50, if not more attempts for sure. Maybe even 100, because a lot of those attempts were so short. Once you get caught into an attack, you could be done within 2 attacks if you get caught up. Mesmer's the same thing. I've done 4 hours of it. I wouldn't know the amount of attempts, but there's been, I'd say half of those attempts I'm done within 15 seconds. I just get caught up in an attack and get destroyed. But it is a fun fight. Definitely fun.
Cool. Yeah, I do think all of these fights, at least the ones that I've done, have been an absolute blast. Again, you kind of know going in to an Elden Ring or a Dark Souls or a Bloodborne that you're really going to be challenging yourself. And that feeling of finally overcoming a really difficult boss or a really difficult area is the feeling that we all love, right? I mean, it's so cool. And again, the thing too, and this is kind of a little bit off topic, but I love the lore implications that they've done within this DLC. I actually, story-wise, Elden Ring is very, very interesting, but within the DLC, they really are diving into a lot of these characters that we know and love, which I really, really appreciate as well, because I love some juicy lore, especially in Elden Ring. But and you're so right, too, about having Mimic, even for that second, to create a little bit of a distraction, to either heal or kind of time your attacks and decide what you want to do. I often, Uno, I don't know if this happens to you, but sometimes I'll get way too greedy. Like, way too greedy.
Always.
I'll go, instead of like going one hit back up, I'll go, oh, he's stunned for a second, and I go for 3, and then next thing you know, his poise isn't broken, and I'm just destroyed. So finding that patient balance of timing your attacks correctly is also fun. It really is like a puzzle. It really
on
is.
The subject of lore too, like this game definitely puts the lore at the forefront. Like it actually, in this game, there is a more obvious path to follow because the characters you interact with and even some of the like map features showcase you a certain path that, at least from my belief, from what I've understood from this lore, seems to be where you should be heading. But even you and I, we had this discussion. You went to an area I completely have not seen yet, with what we both anticipate is a completely optional boss, but has huge lore and story implications on a large scale, not even on an Elden Ring DLC scale, but on an Elden Ring proper scale. So it's been very neat because Elden Ring and a lot of the Dark Souls games, while I love the combat and I love that challenge, the lore to me is almost secondary. I like getting into it, but I'm not like, it's not the driving force for me. I'm not looking to find out the next piece of the story. Whereas in this one, the story is very well realized. It's very easy to follow rather than your typical Souls games. So I'm really curious to see, especially because now I'm at the Mesmer fight, and I feel like the Mesmer fight is going to either be a turning point in the story, or at least will have large story implications if I get through it. I'm very curious to see what this all leads to at the very end of the DLC. And I have heard, for as bad as the Mesmer fight is, I was told the final fight of the game is even worse.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, which I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the implications of that are. I don't think I can imagine what it is. Every time we come into an Elden Ring boss and it's a humanoid character, I know I'm getting my ass kicked.
Horrified.
Yes.
Immediately.
Yes. I'd much rather a giant beast than a man with a sword or a woman with a sword. No way. I know exactly what's going to happen in those ones.
If you're a human and you're walking slowly towards me, I want to get out of there.
For sure. Yeah,
just let me run.
I'd rather you have four heads for sure. So yeah, this Elden Ring DLC has been incredible. I was super curious to find out if it would do well because of the bar that you need to cross to play it. You know, most of my friends, I have maybe 5 friends who are actively playing the DLC, and then I might have like a dozen friends who are trying to get there. But it seems like it's selling well. According to stats, it sold over 5 million copies in under 3 days, which I think is an immense amount considering this is DLC for a video game, and DLC for a video game that you need to have completed the video game to play. Stats according to this, and this is everyone that owns Elden Ring, only 40% of players have killed Mog, and only 55% of players have killed Radon. And you need both of those to die to play this DLC. So of the people who own Elden Ring, only 40% of them can actually play the DLC, which is unreal to think.
Yeah. That is absolutely wild to think about. Mm-hmm. And the fact still that it sold so well in only 3 days is awesome. It's really, really cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Elden Ring has sold over 25 million copies. And so with this 5 million of DLC sold, that's 30 million sold. But if we were just to use the stats on who beat Mog, only 10 million of the 25 million people who bought it originally are even capable of playing the DLC. So that's you're talking about a pool of people. There's only 10 million people in the world who can play the DLC, and 5 million have already bought it. So I think in all it is doing very well.
Well, and also for anyone who has played From Software Soulsborne games, this is something that they have always done. Mm-hmm. In Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, Bloodborne, a lot of their DLC is end game stuff. Oh, yeah. So obviously Elden Ring is their most successful project for sure. But I love that they've stuck to that because the DLC is incredibly challenging. So of course it makes sense that you can only access the DLC super late game. But I love that they've kind of stuck to that format.
Mm-hmm. Do you think so? Just as a generality question, do you think From Software makes their next game even more challenging, or do you think this is it? Do you think this is where it ends? Because I don't know how much more challenging we can get without it feeling cheap, right? Even this, like I know there's mixed reviews and a lot of people feel like the difficulty is too high. I still feel like it's rewarding and I can still get to the other end of it. Even this Mesmer fight, I know if I which I will probably do. If I step away and go through the beginning areas and grind some side bosses a little more and kind of explore some of the dungeons, I feel like 20 levels in, or at least I forget what the name of the Shadow of the Erdtree item that reduces the damage taken. Like
the Scadu tree or Shadow tree.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
So those fragments, like maybe I have to need a little more of those to really make a dent into Mesmer. But I genuinely feel like I can beat Mesmer. I think I could do it. I've gone to a certain point where I could see there's a path. But now I don't know what's after that. I don't know how much left afterwards.
It's interesting that you bring up the difficulty, Uno, because I don't know necessarily if they're going to continue to up the challenge in the sense of generally, but I find that From Software challenges us in different ways. Like, for example, when I played the original Dark Souls, I played very passively. I had a big shield and a big sword. And then you go into something like Bloodborne, where if you try to play like that, you're going to get destroyed. It encourages aggressive gameplay. Then you go to Sekiro, where you're forced to get good at parrying. So they're all challenging in their own ways. Elden Ring the exact same way. So whether they continue to up the difficulty, specifically like Elden Ring style, I'm not sure, because I don't know how much further you can go. But From Software will find a way to challenge us in new ways. And I think Elden Ring is so great and accessible. It can seem overwhelming because it is indeed open world, but it's the first Soulsborne game where if you're stuck 99% of the time, you can just go somewhere else. And then maybe you'll find an item, maybe you'll level up a little more, maybe you'll find a different path to get to where you want to go. So they've given you so many different options and choices as far as how you'd like to play and where you'd like to go. But I'll tell you this, I will be the first one in line for the next Soulsborne From Software Elden Ring game. And I'll tell you what, this DLC, it doesn't even feel like DLC. This feels like Elden Ring 1.5.
Oh yeah, it feels like an extension.
Like Elden Ring 2.
Yeah, if I had played it all in one sitting, I don't think I would think twice of it being a different thing. It just feels like a further extension of the first game. Definitely, they've reserved some of the more beautiful areas to this DLC. But if I played it a part of the original story, other than it having to be very, very late, I wouldn't have thought twice about it.
Right.
I'm actually, I mean, this is a bold prediction, but I hope From Software, their next game is co-op focused. You know, like a lot of the current games are meant to be single-player experiences. You can bring other people in to help you, but it is very much built in a way that they want you to try and achieve all of these things on your own. You know, they make it very difficult for you to call in a person, and you can only really call in certain areas. I would be very curious to see, especially with the advancement of how difficult these games are getting, if they continue that way. What a game built from the ground up where you can be 2 to 3 people simultaneously at all times would feel like, because I feel like that would feel like a very different experience than all previous software games, and also may open up to a completely like different branch of storytelling that they haven't done before. So yeah, I'm hoping that is the future of it, or Bloodborne 2.
That's great. I love that idea.
Or just give me Bloodborne
Seriously.
2. Yeah.
Yeah, or Bloodborne 2, please, for the love of God. For the love of all that is holy,
waited
give
so
us
long.
Bloodborne 2.
Anyways, we'll be playing more Elden Ring in the coming weeks. I'm sure you will hear more about it as well. But in the meantime, we will be talking about the news right after this. And we're back. Welcome back, friends. Now is our news segment. If you have listened to previous All Elite Arcade podcasts, you know very well that our second segment, we talk about this week in news. It's not been an immense week in news, but there's been some very interesting stuff. Starting with this one. There's been an application or an online database that's been built with all kinds of Steam information. And just recently, Steam users have been using this tool to estimate the value of their accounts and how much of their account is wasted. What they are calling the pile of shame. This website at steamidfinder.com will determine how many games you have, the cost of your games in total. To give you an example, I found out I have over 1,100 video games and I've spent $13,000 in a decade. So that is a very alarming thing to read out loud, for sure.
Impressive.
It is, yes, that's right.
You mean impressive.
That's what I meant. I'm the king of video games, for sure. Unfortunately, it didn't notify me of what games I was in my pile of shame. But in the whole world, and this is an estimate, obviously the database is not 100% accurate, but in the whole world, Steam users have over $19 billion of video games they have never played.
Wow.
That is more.
19 billion.
Yes, that is more money than the gross national product of several countries. It's I'm not surprised. Even it's funny because the Steam Summer Sale is on right now, and I just bought $150 of video games, and I think I'm going to play the one video game that cost me $2 within that bundle that I bought, and probably never play the other ones. So I'm not entirely surprised that this is the truth. It is just alarming to see in numbers, especially when it'll calculate yours. So if you would like to go and calculate yours, SteamIDfinder.com. It'll tell you about your account. It'll tell you about how...
I've got to do this.
Yes, you got it. Please.
I've got to do this.
I know. I think I definitely have more video games than you on Steam because you were more of a console player originally.
I am. That is true. So I definitely have more and own more games on console, and definitely quite a few that I have not played yet. I have a decent Steam library, but I'm very confident nowhere close to the amount that you do. But at some point, I gotta up my Steam library, I think.
Yeah, I can't believe I own so many games that I've never played, but that's how Steam gets you. They sell you those games. When it says 90% off on a video game, I am so compelled to buy it.
Right.
It feels foolish to not buy a game when it's 10% of the cost. And I assume that's what the whole world's been doing too, because that is an immense amount of money out there.
We do talk about this all the time, Uno, but like, again, there are incredible video games that are releasing every single week. And in a perfect world, we could play them all. But realistically, to have time to be able to play all these games is borderline impossible.
It's impossible.
Which is both incredible and then also sad.
Yeah.
To think, like, we'll never play every game that we want to, because I want to play them all. I really, really do.
I have these weird moments of melodrama in my life where I realize that, like, I'll never be able to engage in all of the art that I want to. You know, be it movies, be it video games, be it music, plays, Broadways, so on. I'll watch one and be completely amazed and feel in love with an art form, and then realize I can't possibly explore this art form entirely if I'm also exploring 5 other art forms. It's there's so much content in the world. Be it music, movies, but video games alone, like. Open Steam on any day, and there's like 10 games that come out on an independent level. And yes, of course, not every game is a great one, but there are way more great games nowadays than there ever were before.
It's never been a better time to be a gamer. It really has. Between the attention to the retro stuff and the constant new games that are coming out, the indie scene is just exploding. There are so many different avenues and so many different amazing games and amazing stories to experience. There really is.
So if you also go to this Steam ID Finder, it's not all doom and gloom. Don't worry. It will not just tell you about all the wasted money you have. It will also tell you the best value games you have. So it'll tell you based on the hours that you've played and the price you played for a game or for that video game, what is your best value. I know at 100% mine is going to be Vampire Survivors. That was $3 and I spent 140 hours on it. But go out there, do get that calculation. And you know what? Go to youtube.com/awgames, go in our comment section. Tell us what is your best value video game according to your Steam ID Finder. And tell us the percentage of your library that is unplayed. Because...
I definitely have to check this out. Oh no, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm very curious is what I'm going to say.
What I was just going to say is, again, I definitely have to get this set up and check out my Steam library. This seems so cool. It's SteamIDfinder.com. But I do know, as far as the value question, I think for me, Halo 5 Guardians on the Xbox One, I know it was a full-price game, but Uno, I have over 1,000 hours in that game. Easily. And I would have to go and check, but definitely over 1,000 hours. So I think I got my value out of Halo 5.
I think so too. Yeah, I wonder where you rank in the. I don't know if this information's out there too, but where you rank compared to other people. Like, are you in the top 1% of Halo players on hours? You know?
Right. So I think I know that you can check within your friends, like your friends list. But as far as that's a good question. I wonder how many people. With the general public, yeah.
Well, if you're out there and you know how to handle a database, let us know if you can give us that information as well, because I love numbers and I love ranking myself compared to the world as well. That's if you want to, SteamIDfinder.com. Other big piece of news, we've just recently found out that multiple Assassin's Creed remakes are on their way. This was actually confirmed by the Ubisoft CEO, Guillemot, which is a French name. He mentioned in an interview that players can be excited about some remakes. He didn't voice out which ones, but it will not be the same experience every year. So noting that there will be different remakes per year. So they haven't disclosed which one other than potentially Black Flag is getting a remake.
That's what
that seems like the one. And I bet you like maybe Assassin's Creed 2 would probably would benefit from this, because that is of all the Assassin's Creed, most people's first big Assassin's Creed game was Assassin's Creed 2. I have a feeling that is going to be one of the remakes. But there's also a series of side Assassin's Creed games that will be that are being worked on called Assassin's Creed Hex. That is the working title for an upcoming installment of a Assassin's Creed series, being part of the Animus Hub platform. So that's the gaming hub within the video game itself. That should be launching around the same time as Shadows, which is the next video game, which I believe is in November. So there's a lot of Assassin's Creed stuff coming out in the next few years.
Yeah. But commenting quickly on, I'm ashamed to say this, but I have never played Assassin's Creed Black Flag, but I have heard so many times that how badly people want that game remade. It's their favorite Assassin's Creed of all time. So I really, really do hope that they are indeed remaking Black Flag, because I would love to experience it, especially in a current generation form. Because I have seen clips and I've watched reviews and seen footage of this game, and it does look awesome. But as far as for sure, again, I do stand by this. I think Assassin's Creed Shadows looks really good.
Oh, yeah.
Really, really. I love that environment and the setting and things like that. I mean, depending on how good that is, that has a chance to definitely win Game of the Year, or at least be nominated.
It is also very late in the year where it'll be fresh on people's minds. So I would not be surprised if it at least gets some fairly high ratings. And truthfully, it's the first one in a while that I'm genuinely interested in. I played a little bit of Valhalla, and I skipped Odyssey entirely. And then I think I skipped the Syndicate was, I think, the one before. I skipped that entirely. I hadn't played one
since... There was Origins.
Yep, Orange. I skipped that one too. Black Flag was the previous one that I played, because an open world game where you get to be a pirate is something that I always wanted to do. You know, you get to be a pirate in a lot of games, but you don't get to sail a ship, you don't get to steal, you don't get to do every aspect of it until Sea of Thieves, and that's a completely different type of game too. Sure. So that was the one I really invested in. So if they make the remake, that makes me happy for sure, but I think Shadows will be a big hit as well.
I do too.
This one's for you. GOG is preserving the original Resident Evil trilogy this year, and you can buy the very first one right now. So we know Resident Evil's been remade multiple times. The first game had an HD remake for GameCube and also on PC. So that is a lot of ways that people are playing the very first game. Well, not for GOG. GOG is known for saving video game history stuff and playing a lot of the old CRPGs or the old PC games that you've been playing. Well, they are now selling for $9.99 the very original version of Resident Evil. They also have the Japanese versions of it called Biohazard, obviously, and will be releasing the second and third in the near future, including a full bundle that you can get all three for $25. All of those are coming later in the year in 2024, but very interesting to see, especially, you know, with the remakes and all that. It is fun to be able to go back and replay them in the way they were meant to be played, even if sometimes that can be, especially Resident Evil 1. I think it's very neat. It definitely revolutionized the way horror video games were played and survival games were played, but after playing like RE2 Remake, it is probably a very hard one to go back to, especially on the controls alone.
Especially if you're... Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, are you going to be getting this? Do you...
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because, again, going off of what you said, with these original games, Resident Evil 1 through 3, if you're not used to tank controls, it can be very alarming. But these games deserve to be preserved forever. And I would love the idea of an entire generation maybe getting to experience it for the first time, or huge fans like myself getting to replay and re-experience it on like modern PCs and stuff like that. But the Resident Evil franchise is one of my favorite franchises of all time. And it does start with games like Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3. Now, fast forward, RE2 Remake has become my favorite Resident Evil of all time. But I have so many fond memories with this franchise, especially the early games. And there is something to be said, to me, there's something about that 90s aesthetic that is like almost more horrifying. I don't know what it is.
But the diminished graphics actually help it in a way. It's so much darker. The weight between doors and the camera angles, and also just like the extra fear of not having full control of your body, like that extra time of inputting a direction before you move forward, definitely makes it scarier for sure.
It adds to the awkwardness and where you're like, oh my god, I got to get out of here. And also the fixed camera angles. They can tell exactly the story they want to, because you can't freely move the camera. If they want to do a jump scare, if they want to make you dread walking around a corner and you just hear the shuffling of a zombie but you don't know where it is, they can do that with these original games. So again, I can't recommend enough. If you like the current Resident Evil games and you have not played the originals, seriously, do yourself a favor and check these out. These are timeless classics that, again, deserve to be preserved forever and ever.
And for the people who are very into Resident Evil, the 2 that is coming out later this year will have the American and the Japanese versions. It will also have Fourth Survivor and Tofu mode enabled from the very beginning, so you don't have to play through the game to unlock those. And then Resident Evil 3 will also come in with Mercenaries mode included. So it has all the pieces from the original, as well as like a much easier path of access to some of the special modes for sure.
Yeah.
And then our final story for the day, somehow linking our Assassin's Creed and Resident Evil stories together. It would seem that mobile ports for video games such as Resident Evil 4, Death Stranding, and Assassin's Creed Mirage have bombed, have tanked tremendously. This has come from mostly Apple, but Apple uses these ports to demonstrate the advanced graphics of the new phones like the iPhone 15 Pro, Pro Max, and the high-end iPads. And despite a lot of people downloading them, because you can download them for free, play, I think, a certain amount of time, and then pay for the full versions, some of these titles downloaded over 300,000 times. It did not translate to a lot of actual buys on mobile and iPad. So here are the big four. Resident Evil 4, which was $30 to unlock the full game. This is on mobile and iPad. Had over 350,000 downloads, which is a good amount of downloads for a mobile platform. But only estimated value of revenue was about 200,000, which would mean only 7,000 people roughly paid to unlock the full game, versus the 8 million copies that were sold across platforms on console. So it's a very, very small amount of people. Resident Village also came out much cheaper than RE4, only $16, about the same amount of downloads, over 30 or 350,000, only making half of the revenue, $92,000, which means only less than 5,500 people unlocked it full game compared to the 10 million copies sold everywhere. So it's, and then like Death Stranding does even worse. Like there's, I don't think, and I think there's a market for video games on mobile, but I just don't think big experiences like Resident Evil that are made for graphics, that are made to scare you, that are made for controller specifically. You could connect your control to your phones and stuff. I just don't think these are the experiences people want to play on mobile.
I think, again, mobile gaming is the biggest format as far as financial gain in the world with video games. It seriously is unbelievable how successful mobile gaming is. But I do think, generally speaking, a lot of the gaming done on mobile is casual play.
Yes.
Like I will casually play like Jetpack Joyride 2. I have a blast with on my phone. Just a fun, I don't want to say mindless, but just a very easy pick up and play it for 15 minutes. I think people who are, playing games like Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil Village and Death Stranding These are gamers. So they probably have a Steam Deck,
Yes.
or they probably have a Switch, or they find different ways with their home consoles to play these experiences. I think it's incredible that the iPhone 15 Pro can play these games. That is so unbelievably cool to have that access. But again, generally speaking, I just feel like most people would rather play it on their handheld or home console.
Yeah, I think for all of these games, especially like, playing Resident Evil is, they're lengthy games. Like Resident Evil 4 is at least a 15-hour video game, and Village is about 15 to 20 hours. Death Stranding is a 60-plus hour video game. That's a lot of video game to do on a mobile. And, like, I'm sure if I went through my mobile numbers, I've played more than 60 hours of a lot of video games.
Sure.
But I played them at, like, 10 minutes a time. Jump in, I do a crossword, I do a word puzzle. They're quick. I think that is what is the value of playing on mobile. To me, like, I just don't, even if, like, Last of Us dropped on our mobile, I don't think it will sell very well, because I think what sells better are short and simpler experiences. In fact, I think, like, if we're looking at the big video game distributors, the one company I think that could make a lot of money is if Nintendo just said, hey, Nintendo Online is available on your phone too. You can play Zelda on your phone. And I think you could do that already. You can emulate it, and then they have certain products that you could buy, like Mario Runner and so on. But if you told me, like, Super Mario World from the Super NES is available to play and officially through Nintendo for like $6, I feel like that would make more money and probably have a much larger user base than these large experiences that definitely would be better suited for a big TV and a controller.
That's true, especially going off, for example, I bought Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Streets of Rage 2 on my phone, and those are very fun, classic, retro, but easy to play games on my phone. So, I mean, again, I think it's amazing that there are all these different formats and situations where people can experience these awesome games any way that they want to. But, Uno, I completely agree with you. People want simple, quick, easy games that they can hop on and play for a little bit on their phone. And then for these blockbuster titles, they either want to sit in front of their TV or play it on a Steam Deck or something like that.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to leave it to you users and of the iPhone 15 or of any. Honestly, I'm not even at the 15 level. I'm on a much lower level. I don't buy them yearly. I can't do it. It's too much.
I can't.
But listeners, what do you think is a critically acclaimed console game that could come to mobile that you would actually enjoy playing? Let us know in our comments, youtube.com/AWGames. We will be reading them and taking your suggestions. Also, hey, we're going to be answering some questions from you, from our community mailbag, right after this. And we're back. Welcome back. We're at our community mailbag segment. That's right. You.
I love this.
You, the listeners, can send questions to myself and Chugs, and we will answer them right here on All Elite Arcade. All you got to do is go to tbs.com/arcade mailbag. That's tbs.com/arcade mailbag. Let us know what you want us to answer, and you will get the opportunity to hear it right here on All Elite Arcade. Today we actually have 4 questions. Y'all have been sending your questions every week, and they've been very interesting, and we thank you for it because sometimes we can't think of things we want to share, and it is much easier for you to tell us what you want to hear because it also makes us happy. It stirs this part of my brain where I'm like, oh, I completely forgot about this. I never would have thought about this at all.
Absolutely.
So here's what I'm going to do. I'll read the first question. Maybe you read the second. Or do you want me to read all of them? What do you feel like doing?
Oh, we can do every other.
Okay, let's do every other. I'll start with the first one.
Yeah.
This one comes from Rad Claw. Hi, Chugs and Uno. Huge fan of the pod. What are your favorite box arts of all time? Ooh. And are there any games you loved but thought had terrible box art? Thank you. I will say, starting with the terrible box art, there used to be, when we were kids, like Super Nintendo, Genesis, going into like N64, PlayStation 1. Box art was incredible. We're talking art form. We're talking paintings. But PS2, PS3, I remember every video game was a character standing dead set in the center, and most of them was like the back of a character. I think there was so many third-person and first-person shooters at that time, and I remember how lazy it felt. I would go to my local GameStop or EB Games in Canada, and I'd be like, oh, there's Call of Duty, there's a Siphon Filter, there's so on and so forth. And every game was the main character from behind at a slight angle, or it was a forward shot of their face with a gun in front of them, kind of like the the CS2 cover kind of thing.
Yeah.
As far as best of all time, that's a hard one. I feel like the Final Fantasy ones from like Super NES days had incredible box art. And if we're talking box art, we mostly saw the North American ones, which were one thing, but the European and Japanese ones are incredible. They really went far and beyond what we would do in America. I feel like a lot of time in America they simplified it so that it would sell more to children and stuff. Whereas like in Japan and Europe, you would get like Contra would get these full spreads that just were straight up pieces of art. I can't think of a single one, but I feel like the Final Fantasy early ones I remember very fondly for sure.
So mine's the opposite. I can't really think of one that I think is just absolutely terrible, but I definitely have some ideas in my mind of ones that I really like. But Uno, first and foremost, again, there's a local game store here that oftentimes sells complete in-box Super Famicom games. Yep. And I've gotten to see some of this box art. And like the Donkey Kong Country series, that box art is so cool for the Super Famicom. There's so many cool box art pieces. You're absolutely right. But the ones that stick out to me is the Streets of Rage 2 box art from the Sega Genesis is so cool. It has every character, the background. You could just tell the love and attention to detail they put into this box. But to me, the most iconic box art, at least to me in my mind, is the Final Fantasy VII on the PlayStation 1 box art with Cloud there with his sword.
Yes, in the lower third with all of Midgar in the back, yeah.
The reactor in the background. That to me just instant butterflies when I see that box art. It's so cool. It's so iconic and fairly simple, but again, something that's just burned into my memory. So I'm going to say favorite of all time, probably the FF7.
A great choice. A great choice for sure. I mean, Final Fantasy just has always knocked it out of the park when it comes to art. And FF7, of course, one of our favorites, bound to win at least one of our suggestions for sure.
It's got it. I got to mention FF7 and Elden Ring at least one podcast every time. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Radclaw, for your question.
Yes. And next up, Annie. Annie, thank you very much for the question. Hey, guys, love the show. Thank you. My question is very simple. Who, in your opinion, is the greatest video game villain? Uno,
Ooh.
I will start this one.
Oh, please. That will give me enough time.
Easy, right? And don't get me wrong. I love a lot of iconic villains in video games. But without question, my favorite villain in gaming is Handsome Jack from Borderlands 2. That character and the gentleman who voiced Handsome Jack did such a wonderful job. Up to that point, I had not really seen voice acting done to this level for a villain. There's so many iconic lines that he has. The things I would look forward to when I was playing Borderlands 2 would be when Handsome Jack would call in and talk to the character. There's the classic line of him eating the pretzels and going, God, these pretzels suck. And then he goes into his whole monologue. When he wanted to get really upset and really angry, I felt it. When he was laughing and cracking up at himself, you could just feel how arrogant and egotistical and damaged this character was based on what was written and how it was performed. He is such a amazing villain because his story is so interesting. Like, it's a classic villain story where he starts off as a good guy and then eventually something horrible happens to him and it makes him evil. And he becomes the most evil guy in the Borderlands franchise. But he is so charismatic. He's so interesting. Every single word, every single sentence he says, I hang on to it. And again, there's that weird thing where he's so terrible, but there's almost like a soft spot I have for him as well. So for me, without question, Handsome Jack from Borderlands 2 is the greatest video game villain of all time, to the point where for All In, I wore Handsome Jack inspired gear. So yeah, love Handsome
I
Jack.
100% knew this would be your answer, because you've been very honest with everyone about this, how big of a part his promos also towards your pro wrestling promos as well, right?
Absolutely. Yes, for sure. Like, because again, when you look at something like that, it's always exciting to take other things that you're interested in and apply them to your work as well. And Handsome Jack for sure was someone that I studied and listened to. Just the cadence and the overall, again, you can tell he really believes what he's saying. And again, I just want to hang on every word. Handsome Jack is the best. The best.
So, I mean, this will seem like a cop-out answer as well, because it feels in a lot of ways what people... Well, first of all, we already talked Final Fantasy, and that's the first thing that came to my mind. To me, Final Fantasy VI, Kefka, which is like oftentimes mentioned as one of the greatest villains of all time, but he has such an insane impact on the video game and has absolutely no care for the well-being of others, for the well-being of your characters, for anything. Pure like chaos in a video game. And then other than that, this will be super left field compared to it, but I'm a big Banjo-Kazooie guy, and Gruntilda I think is an insanely underrated villain, purely on a comedic stance, because like it's just her doing poetry for the whole time. Her whole plan makes no sense whatsoever. Just stealing his sister to try and be youthful. Anyway, one of my favorite villains myself, but that's also because I have such a soft spot for the very first game. But yes, so throw Gruntilda into the next Smash Brothers game. That is my suggestion.
Yes, great choices, Uno. Great choices. But Annie, thank you so much for the question. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much, Annie. And as well, a reminder, if you want your questions, tbs.com/arcade mailbag. The next one is from Courtney. Courtney says, there's a very popular game right now called Chained Together. Please look it up if you have not heard of it. It's basically a co-op version of Only Up, where you are chained to your partner and have to climb out of hell. All I want to know is, who do I have to murder to get you guys to play this game together? All right, well, first of all, we don't condone murder. No. Just so we're clear, do not murder people.
Pump the brakes.
Yeah, that's right.
Pump the brakes.
Courtney, that is a crime. We do not support crimes.
Yeah. We don't got to murder anybody,
right.
Okay?
This is strictly a video game podcast. But I have actually watched some Chained Together content. I think we talked about this in a few episodes ago about the YouTubers we followed. Markiplier and his friends Wade and Bob ended up playing Chained Together. I think you can play it up to 3 players, and literally it is a vertical space 3D platformer where you are chained together, and it makes it incredibly difficult, because if one person doesn't make the jump or doesn't make the timing, then the other person either has to have made the jump and try to pull up the rope to pull them back in, or you fall and you plummet to your death. Second part, I don't think it's going to be as hard as murdering someone to get us to play this video game.
I don't think so either, because Uno, that sounds very fun.
Yeah.
I feel like at some point in the future, me and you getting to play Chained Together is right up my alley. Yeah. I mean, anytime we get to play anything together would be awesome, but Chained Together specifically looks like it would be an absolute blast. You'd probably have to carry me, literally. I'd be hanging and you'd
I'm very good at these platforming games, but I also am not very good at games that are designed to make me angry.
Right.
And so not that I get angry, I just get fed up fairly quickly, where I'm like, okay, this is enough. Like, how much can you really stack against me? I watched about an hour of content, and it does seem manageable, though. Like, it doesn't seem like an extremely cheap one. So yeah, Courtney, to answer your question, you have to murder no one. We'll play it on our own time, and we will report back right here on All Elite Arcade.
We absolutely will. Courtney, thank you so much for the question. And last is from Oliver. And Oliver says, hey guys, my son and I have been watching you guys since Chug's first episode on Arcade 2 years ago when you guys played Far Cry 6 together.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely love that Arcade has moved to a podcast format because we now listen to you guys when I drive him to and from school every Monday. Well, thank you, Oliver. My question is, what has been your favorite All Elite Arcade memories or episodes?
I've got one, and it doesn't include me, but I was a third party in it. There was a very long time where we were having championship bouts for the AW Games Championship, and an opponent would choose one game, the champion would choose one, and then a third game would be chosen at random by the people in the chat. Well, Chugs went on a hell of a run on Halo, an insane run, and it pretty much culminated in this battle between him and Orange Cassidy, where both of you were so jovial coming in, and about 35 minutes into the fight, both of you were like quietly, like sternly looking at the screen because it was intense. It went from you were dominating him to he dominated you on a back end on a second game, and then the third game was like a little bit of inching over each one until you started going forward and got the win. But being present for that, I like for once felt like I've never been to an Evo, and I've never been to a situation where I saw people actually compete in a video game and care to that level, and they're or being an expertise in it to that level, and seeing both of you do it as soon as it was done. You like Orange Cassidy, who is not an emotional man, definitely was pretty emotional after his defeat. If I remember correctly, he spent like the next 2 weeks practicing so that we could get the rematch afterwards as well, which I believe you also beat him in as well.
Yes, that was one of my highlights as well. And just and seriously, one of the best Halo matches, one of the best 1v1s I've ever had.
It was intense.
So Orange, shout out. He's really, really good, and that was fun. A great memory. But I think I mean this, and if we're encompassing all of All Elite Arcade, my favorite memory, if I had to pick one, and I've had a lot of good ones, but was the first episode of this podcast. Because, again, for those of you who don't know, me and Uno have been talking for years about wanting to do a video game podcast. And at one point, it was just an idea in our head. We would look forward to the Twitch streams on Wednesday where we would play a game like Far Cry 6, for example, or do our Halo tournaments. But we always discussed how fun it would be to be able to sit back and talk video game news, what we're playing, maybe answer questions like this. And that first episode, knowing that All Elite Arcade, the podcast, became a reality, was the absolute best. I've been so excited to continue on this journey with Uno and with all of you as you listen to the podcast, as we talk about the thing that we love dearly, and that is video games. So I think realizing that this podcast has become a very real thing was probably the highlight for me, for sure. And many more to come. Many more to come, Oliver.
It's crazy to think that we're at this point. We did definitely discuss this for a very long time. And there was a point in time, even like a year ago, that we were close to it, and pretty much we were told, no, it shouldn't be done right now. And we're like, okay, I guess it's just not something in the works. Now we're doing it every week. It's part of my routine. It's part of what I like doing. I love discussing video games. Of course, me and Chugs love discussing them together. And we're so appreciative of everyone who has been following along for the ride. It will only be expanding, and we will only end up doing more and more fun stuff for sure.
Yes.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to the All Elite Arcade podcast. If you would like your questions answered, do remember tbs.com/arcade mailbag. Also, if you want to comment on it or you want to ask us questions in relation to this very episode, you get the opportunity at youtube.com/awgames. If you watch the video format and go into the comments, we will be reading them and we will be checking them out. Plus, you get to see sometimes some exclusive content such as footage that we have captured ourselves of the video games, or at least some supporting footage when we're talking about certain bosses. You could at least see with your own eyes what we're talking about. That's another episode of All Elite Arcade. It's been a good one. We will be back next week. Chugs, what's on deck this week? Are you playing Elden Ring on Twitch stream the whole time?
Oh yeah. The 5 game cycle has been put on hold. Going forward until I beat it, twitch.tv/the Chugs. I'm going to be playing the entire Elden Ring DLC, Shadow of the Erd Tree. We've been having a blast over there, so please feel free to come and hang out over at twitch.tv/the Chugs and watch me play, enjoy, and die often in the Elden Ring DLC, Shadow of the Erd Tree.
I said publicly on this that I would start Twitch streaming again and do it with Elden Ring. Well, I haven't. I just have not had the opportunity. Life.
You're a busy man.
I am a busy man, and life
man.
advances with or without the Twitch streams, unfortunately. But will I do it in the next week? Probably not. No more promises. From now on, just follow twitch.tv/eviluno, hit that follow button, and you'll be notified legitimately when I do Twitch stream. It will happen soon, though. I want to come back to it. I miss the interactions for sure. Yeah. But if you want to follow us, you can also follow us everywhere, AW Games. We're on every platform, including YouTube. Go to youtube.com/AW Games. That is where you find our video version of the podcast. We will be heading out, and we will see you next week for another edition of All Elite Arcade. Bye-bye.